this query saying create Mermaid sequence diagram for the registration flow, including HTTP requests and responses and database queries. Sorry, it was just voice recognition did not recognize it correctly, but this is the text I want. So we're going to create a Mermaid sequence diagram, and registration flow being like an app registration flow, login flow, these kind of flows. And I want to know what are the HTTP requests and responses and database queries that need to be made in this flow. Okay, and then let's see what ChatGPT can generate for that. So if you haven't seen a Mermaid sequence diagram before, you will see exactly what I'm talking about in just a second. So it's generating right now the Mermaid code. I am using GPT-4. I haven't tried this with GPT-3 or 3.5. I'm not sure if it will work or not, but it might. Okay, so here is my code for the Mermaid sequence diagram. Here you can see the sequence diagram. Several participants being user, client, server, and database. Client is the client app. And then user will tell the clients to enter registration details. Client will tell the server this post request and so on. Now we're going to want to, we've created this, and let's see if we can see this visually rather than in a text format. So let's go over to draw.io, and here I am in draw.io. And what I'm going to do in here is I'll go over to here to this arrange menu, and I'll go into insert, advanced, Mermaid, and then in here I will paste the Mermaid code that ChatGPT generated and keep it at diagram. You can also choose image if you want just an image and not a draw.io diagram, and then hit insert. All right, and so now we can see here, let me zoom this out a little bit so that you can see the whole thing. All right, so I don't know if it's readable for you now that I've kind of shrunk it down a little bit, but here we have the user, the client app, the server, and the database. User will enter registration details. The client side will post that as a post request with the register endpoint to the server with the data such as email and name and password that the user has chosen. And then that registration data will be an insert query into the database. The database will say, now if the registration is successful, the database will send back a success with a user ID. And if registration fails, the database will send back an error with a reason. And then on the server side for the success, we will send a 201 created success message and display that success message to the user, and also ask the user to check his email. And then in the failure case, we will display the error message to the user with the 400 bad request. And then while displaying the success message and the message to check email, we will also have the server send an email to the user. Now that doesn't hit the client app, that hits the user's email inbox. And then the user will basically send back a click verification, like the user will have to click the link in the email, and that will go back to the server. I believe this click verification link will go to a page on the client app, which should send the server that this link was clicked. I don't know what would be a way to get this directly to the server. And then the server would update the user and say that this is now a verified user. Database will send back a success, and the server will again through the client app display that the account is now verified and successful. So I think this diagram that was generated from ChatGPT is more or less correct, except for this part of the user directly telling the client the verification and the server directly telling the user about the account verification success without the client app. Perhaps this is like, a page that is hosted from directly from the server, and this is like an iPhone app or something of that sort. So maybe this is a browser link and this is an app link. So there could be some things like this, in which case this diagram could be more or less correct. But, this step may happen through an app or a web page. So this diagram looks pretty decent, and now you can understand the flow for registering a user. And really all we did was we just generated a Mermaid diagram and import it into draw.io, and we get this entire flow that we are able to understand. And the only thing I had to do was to tell it to create a Mermaid sequence diagram for the registration flow and include the HTTP request responses and the database queries in that. Now that we have seen the flow, let's try to just also quickly look at what does the sequence diagram look like in terms of the code. So here you see that we defined the different participants. You will notice that there are two kinds of arrows that are typically going to be used. I'm only seeing one type, database to server. Let me see here. So, for example, this enter registration details goes this way, but the display success message comes the other way. And oh, I see. Okay, so it's just which participant is talking to which participant direction. So that's fine. You can see that the user will tell the client to enter registration details. Client will tell the server to post the registration. Server will tell the database to insert the new user. There is an else path, which is the registration successful. There's an else path, which is the registration failed, and then end. And you can see that here it says alt here, and then you can see the registration successful and registration failed paths for that alt in here. So so this is basically your success case is database server, and then the messaging on that arrow is success user ID. So this arrow right here, database telling the server, and the message is success user ID. So what you will see here is the participants, colon, and then the message on that arrow. And that's essentially it for all of them, just the same things that we saw in the diagram. And this is just the explanation. So alt block is used to represent two possible scenarios in this case, and you could have multiple scenarios in the same way. You can start the alt block and have else statements for the different blocks, or else if. I haven't tried with multiple blocks, but you can check that. So that's it, guys. That's how you can create very easily a diagram. So now let's say I also want to have a diagram for the login flow. I could say create a Mermaid diagram for the login flow and include the HTTP requests and responses and the database queries in that. And for some reason, my speech is working a little bit slow, so just give it a second or two to complete typing what I just told it. I don't know, this is Siri or Mac. Okay, and then page tends to become unresponsive, and I tell it to wait a little bit longer. Perhaps my system needs a restart, or Siri's having some issue. It's the middle of the night. Maybe they're doing some maintenance work. I don't know. Anyhow, it usually comes back. It gets in some kind of a queue. Maybe Siri or app. See, there it is. So create a Mermaid diagram for the login flow and include the HTTP requests and responses and the database queries in that. Okay, enter. And now ChatGPT is generating the Mermaid sequence diagram. And we copy the code, go over to draw.io. I'll start it on a new page. I will click over on Arrange, Insert, Advanced, Mermaid. I encourage you to, so this can not just do sequence diagram, it can also do class diagrams and graphs and all kinds of things. But, right now we're just doing the sequence diagram. And there it is. We can now see what our login flow should look like. There's a user, tells email and password to the client app, that then posts it to the server, that then tells the database to select that user by email, and it checks to see if the user is found and the password matches. If it gets successful data and it checks this information, then it sends out the 200 OK with an auth token over to the client app, and the client app displays a success message in logged in state to the user. Now, if the user is not found or the password is incorrect, in that case, the database will give an error reason and the server will tell the client an HTTP 401 unauthorized with an error message, and the client app will display a user-friendly error message to the user, and that would be your login flow. So you can see how easily we can get ChatGPT to generate various flows, whether it's SSO or login or registration or forgot password or any other kind of flows that are typical, and we can create diagrams of those flows to really very clearly see what kind of could go on in those flows. And of course, you can alter the code now that you understand how to read it in the Mermaid format to alter your diagram as needed for your application. So we can look at other types in future videos of Mermaid or PlantUML, etc. For flows and different types of flows. Flowcharts, charts, graphs, class diagrams, Gantt charts. And the one we looked at today in this video is sequence diagrams. All right, I will see you guys in another video later. Enjoy your day.